Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the master bather, Scott Bradfield. I've been masturbating since I was 12, but I didn't get really good at masturbating until I was 14 or 15. We don't have a lot of jokes here at the bathtub, but we do get a joke. We basically wear it out until I forget it, and then someday I see it again on one of these videos and I use it again. But we have four jokes and we use the ones we got. So today we're talking about a guy named William Vollmann. I'm doing a vision. This is one of those visual demonstrations which we're really very popular about. This is one of the most popular things of the show is the visual. We do have kind of visual charts and diagrams and stuff like that. And today I wanted to give you an idea. This is about, and that's probably less than a third. That's really a good visual demonstration, masturbator. This is maybe a third of this guy's writing. So I figured I wanted to do this because basically if we took all his real books and put them all together, it'd be definitely taller than me. And they're often known as doorstoppers. They call big books doorstoppers, right? Because they could be, we have, this is Dolores the doorstopper duck. But we don't really need it because we could use one of William Vollmann's books and we could actually put it on either side of the door and then it can't go either way. So he's written a lot of these big books. And we're going to talk a little bit about him today. He's a very interesting writer. That's the end of the visual demonstration. And here's another thing, is that while I've been working on this stuff, I'm always trying to figure out where to put all these books. Because this is just the ones that I got, and then some of the ones that my local library could get me through order. And they're really heavy. I don't mean they're not heavy in a tendentious way, though sometimes they can be, but they are basically just physically heavy. And I want to talk a little bit about them. So I don't even know where to put the damn things. This is definitely a writer who I like, but I can't. We did Joyce Carol Oates. I can't keep them all in the house. So I thought I'd just show you some of the stuff he's done over the years. He's been writing since the mid-'80s. And I knew him because I think his first book, You Brighteners and Angels, this is the American edition, was first published in England. And I published my first couple books over there, so I was always finding them kind of interesting. This is, I try rereading this again. This is a weird, fabulous, nightmare, funny, weird book about, and it's told from the viewpoint of all bugs. It's like a bunch of insects. The main character's name was Bug. And they're fighting, there's like a secret war in the world with electricity. And I'll be honest with you, I never figured out what was going on in this book. I read it once and had to review it, and I really didn't like it. To be honest with you, I tried to reread it recently thinking, well, maybe I did something wrong, and I still can't quite crack this book. So anyway, I had this idea of him as this sort of fabulous writer who did kind of fantastic, strange stuff, and it seemed a bit inchoate and vague. Now, his books after that are very different. So if, like me, you read Your Brighteners and Angels and thought that was what he was doing, his books since then, a book I haven't read, The Rainbow Stories, and more recently, The Royal Family. And the book that I just reviewed, and I'm going to put that on, I'll put a link to it on the piece this week, on our talk this week, is this new one's called The Lucky Star. It's a reference to Judy Garland, who referred herself as a lucky star somewhere over the rainbow or something. And these books they're kind I said the phrase I used in the review is they're kind of like an LGBTQ version of Iceman Cometh. The people all hang around bars, they get drunk, they have sex with each other. There's a variety of like sex workers and strippers. And one of the characters was referred to as a trans woman. Another one's called the lesbian who sleeps with everybody. They're like kind of every variety of sexual identity, I guess. I don't know what to call it. It's a very strange book, but I did like it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's not a lot of work. I would say You Brighteners and Angels is a lot of work. It's not a hard book to read. It's a very repetitive book to read. So it's about this kind of community of people who really have all their relationships with one another through sex, basically, and through love. And they have every variety of love, and there's lots of physical sex scenes which are not at all titillating, but just kind of almost mundane. And then there's lots of just a kind of affection between all these people. It's a very welcoming. If you talk about people who talk about inclusivity, a phrase I don't normally like, it's a very inclusive book. It's a book about people loving and creating their own communities, and it's a very uh, um, positive book in very unpositive times. So I liked it. It's not for everybody. It's not heavily plotted like most Vollmann books, but it's pretty good. Okay, so those are the two. I think the royal family's a lot like it, from what I can tell. Rainbow Stories, a lot of stuff about hanging out in bars with people. He's also written lots of journalism. Again, the typical size of a Vollmann book is like this. It's like most of his books they're like close to 1,000 pages. There's usually about 40 or 50 pages of notes and bibliography in the back. He did 2 books on carbon ideologies, which is, I've only been able to read bits of it. He's actually a pretty good journalist. He just doesn't select much. He just puts it all in there. And it's interviews with the people who run all these power plants and the reasons why carbon is part of our world and destroying our planet, and kind of the business end of it. Not only that, but then what it's doing to our planet. He covers a lot. He goes to Fukushima in this. This is only one of 2 volumes. Okay, and he did that. He does these books like every year. His most famous book is Europe Central. I got halfway through this. I just didn't have time. I quite liked Europe Central. It's probably one of his more. It won the National Book Awards. One of his more accessible books. It's a lot of kind of stories. It's a kind of Dos Passos-like USA, only it's set in Europe, and it deals with a lot of the Germans and the Russians before, during, and after the World War II. And in the background is a lot of everyone's kind of connected to Shostakovich and the kind of weird clash between modernism and postmodern that's in Shostakovich's music. Not my favorite composer, though I like some Shostakovich. So it's got that going on in the background, lots of connections with it. I never finished it, and I would like to finish it possibly someday, but again, most of his books are, 800-900 pages, very small print, and they are kind of all-consuming. This is one volume. It's called The Dying Grass. I never even got a chance to read this. This is one of 7 books about the history of America and the clash between he likes clashes between big cultures, bugs and electricity, and people coming into America and the people who are already there. And Canada. And this is called The Dying Grass, about the Nez Perce War, horrific thing. And this is 1,300 pages with 50, 80 pages of footnotes. The guy really reads. He reads a lot. He's quite smart. I have to say this. He's very smart in a normal way. It's not super clever. He's just kind of assembles a lot of stuff. He's not tendentious about it at all. So I think that's important. It doesn't feel, when you read one of his books, you don't feel like it's being super clever. It's just kind of almost too much material is how I feel sometimes. He's got books on uncentering the Earth, about Copernicus. This is a really interesting book, which I've only just read bits of. Imperial, about the Imperial Valley, a fascinating place. Vollmann's a native of California, and he's moved around quite a bit, but he spent most of his life in California, and he has a real affection for the state, and that's another thing I quite like about him. Another 1,000 pages or so. This is a journalism about the people that live in the Imperial Valley, or the water wars, the history of the area, the immigrant life that's running in and out of it. And again, the sense that he's a very, again, welcoming writer. He really is interested in people and human life in all its forms. And that's one of the things I do like about him. This, not surprisingly, possibly my favorite of the books I've read so far, I've only read 4 or 5 of them maybe all the way through, is Riding Toward Everywhere. This is not too long. It's kind of his version of, what's the famous Agee, the Let Us Now Praise Famous Men book, about going through the Dust Bowl period and taking photographs of all these people whose lives were ruined by this horrible period in American history. And this is a much more happy book. It's about, he likes to, among the many things this guy likes to do, one of them is to ride freight trains. By the way, I don't want to do any of these things. He likes to get on freight trains and go all over California, which sounds like a lot of fun. But this is a really kind of all his books are pretty well written. This is a smaller book, much more compact. It's really filled with a kind of love for California. There's some very funny scenes, particularly at the beginning with his father, and a much more realistic book. There are aspects of him that are very Steinbeck-like. very Steinbeck-like, and very natural. I think of him more of a naturalistic novelist rather than a fantastic or fabulous novelist. Okay, I showed you this one. That was my favorite. I wanted to close with a couple of things. So this is a book called Conversations with William Vollmann, and it's at University of Mississippi Press does these. If you see a writer that you like, they do a lot of books. You know, they've done Vonnegut or whoever. They'll do everybody that's fairly well known, and they take a lot of interviews, particularly just not the serious Paris Review interviews so much as just kind of newspaper articles and newspaper profiles and so forth. And I really liked the guy I read about in this book. And couldn't really cover most of it, but he does talk at one point. You know, he's very aware of how his books are received, and I think this is a pretty good vision of what most people feel when they see a Vollmann novel. Most people, I don't think, actually read the books. They look at them and maybe flick through them a little bit. They see lots of words, maybe not too many paragraph indentations, and they figure they're good doorstops. He seems so. And I'll stop right there. So doorstops, it's kind of hard not to use that term when you're thinking about Vollmann. There's two lines I love in this that he says about himself. Oh, because he's written so many big books. I gave his first book a pretty bad. I didn't like his first book when I read it. I think I was a little annoyed when I read it. And I much prefer his later stuff. But he says at one point all the books he publishes, and he just produces so much stuff and lots of journalism. He says this thing about, they asked him what he thinks about bad reviews, because he gets lots of mixed reviews. We're all going to die, and hopefully we're not lying in our deathbeds thinking, I got a terrible review back in 2013. I love that quote. And from that, as soon as I read that, I liked him. This is kind of an interesting book if you want to be a Vollmann file. I think it's hard to be a Vollmann file. There's just so much of this stuff. I would recommend. I think the new book is a good place to start with him. And if I picked one book to read, if you're interested in California literature and literature about California, I would strongly recommend Writing Toward Everywhere, which was his nonfiction book of a few years back. And then the new one, Lucky Star, it's a response to the horrific social crap of our world under the current administration, which is not going to get any better when we get these idiot Bloomberg types, you know, the battle of the billionaires. So this might be worth checking out too. All right, that's enough for today. That's a lot to cover. I'm going to go take some of these back to the library now and put the other ones I'm keeping on my shelf. Okay, happy bathing.